Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I am Marnese Jackson, and I am the Executive Director of the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition. And today's agenda, we'll do introductions, give you a brief history about Midwest BDC. We'll have an icebreaker. Then we'll get into talking about coalition building, and then I'll pivot over to Maggie, who's our communications manager, and she will train us on communications for coalitions, and then we'll do a Q&A, and then we will close out. So in the next slide, the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition was founded in 2019 to develop and implement equitable strategies to achieve zero emissions from the Midwestern building sector by 2050. Our priority states are Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, Ohio, Missouri, Indiana, and Iowa. And so we're here to advance policy, educate, train members to go out to do the work of climate justice in communities focused on buildings, homes, commercial buildings, schools, etc. And so with that, we have been here since 2019 to eliminate fossil fuels in buildings, and we were the only coalition out here focused on equity as our motto, and which is also our theory of change to advance equitable building decarbonization. And so with us, we have officially became a 501c3 in February of this year, and we are now moving to do more local campaigns and local work in communities who suffer from environmental and climate issues due to indoor air quality, redlining, gentrification, etc. And so as a coalition, we're here to make sure that we are helping members and organizations to do that locally. And we have all types of members from local, state, regional, and national organizations like environmental and climate justice, to Big Greens, architect, engineers, and we do have individual members outside of organizational members. So within this state region. So in the next slide, I'm going to introduce the rest of our team, and we'll let Maggie introduce herself. So Jacob Surfling is our Director of Policy and Projects. He's in in Iowa. And then Edward Davis, he's our Director of Grants and Development. He's in Michigan. Terry Cush is our Director of Operations, and she's located in Washington, D.C. Dana Gibson is our administrative associate, and she's in Michigan, and we will be bringing on a policy manager shortly. But Maggie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, thanks, Marnese. My name is Maggie Heiser. I'm our communications and digital marketing manager here at the Coalition. So I'll be jumping in the back half of this training to go over some communications tactics for within and then outside of coalitions as well. I'm based in Delaware, Ohio, which is just outside of Columbus.
Thank you so much, Maggie. So you can see we're represented well geographically. So we will be bringing on a new staff person, and we'll let you know where they'll be located soon to come. Yay. So with the Midwest BDC, we do have standing community norms here. Since we had to move to webinar format, we will allow you all to come off of mute, unfortunately, and come up to the to become a panelist. Unfortunately, we experienced some Zoom bombing, so we want to make sure that we eliminate anything that that's not productive. So our standing community norms is notice intent lean towards impact, use I statements, practice self-awareness, stop and witness, assume good intentions, listen to understand and not to respond. Ask yourself, why am I talking? Why aren't I talking? Practice active listening. Everyone is a teacher and everyone's a learner. Share responsibility for keeping to the norms. Adhere to the speak next indicators and show up in your authentic self. Speak to the whole group. Minimize jargon, like acronyms, anything technical. And if you need to explain it, please do. And then explain the terms when you're asked, and then participate and lean into discomfort. Okay, So here in the coalition, and a big part of coalition building, especially when you have a grassroots model or a framework, you should operate by the HIMAS principles for democratic organizing, which is one, be inclusive, have a emphasis on bottom-up organizing, let people speak for themselves, work together in solidarity and mutuality, build just relationships among ourselves, and then commit to self-transformation. And so, if you're not a member of Midwest BDC, we of course invite you. It's free. Our communications manager, Maggie, she works so hard on this QR code. So we want you all to embrace it and become a member of the coalition. We do offer orientations monthly, or you can just set us some time to get with me to get oriented to the Midwest BDC organization, coalition. Like I said, we have over 200 plus organizations and individuals in our coalition. And so, of course, we would love for you to come along to do the work of coalition building, as we will discuss what is that, right? So we invite you. So please take some time to scan the QR code and become a member. We look forward to inviting you to our listservs where you receive all the information that we are working on. So in the next slide, so in the chat, because I do see people here in the chat, could you please tell us, and if you're interested in coming off of mute, just raise your hand. We will unmute you. What is your favorite social movement? Because usually coalitions develop out of something that has happened in the world, and everybody wants to get together to organize a campaign around advocacy efforts. What is your favorite social movement? And of course, we would love to know who you are, where you reside, what state, organization that you're representing. What social movement are you interested in or that you really like? So mine definitely was the Black Power movement in the 60s. In the 70s. That was my favorite social movement because it lifted up Black people having more pride within ourselves. Also advocacy around and against police brutality, of course, civil rights, food justice, and community. So we would love to know, what is your favorite social movement? And you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat by using the reactions. I believe you can do that. So we'll take a minute and I'll wait for your response. And even though we have to cut down on our interactions by way of Zoom because of the bombing, we can still use our speak indicators with the reaction. So, and use the chat function. So what is your favorite social movement? Maggie, what's your favorite social movement?
I was gonna say, yeah, I can jump in for sure. I think one that was really inspiring to me, I mean, it was when I was younger, but still now I feel like I'm constantly learning, was specifically the environmental justice movement. And I feel like the reason why that was more impactful to me than just like the general like environmental movement or climate movement, even though I care about those things too, I think environmental justice was the first movement that I was familiar with, at least, where it's like, okay, we're focusing on how this is impacting people. Now, like, of course, I care about like the polar bears and the trees and all of that too.
Mm.
But just being like, we're focusing on like people's health and public health and how this is like just impacting humans' lives and not just having the like climate and nature and everything. I think that was really just like inspiring to me. And then that's when I was like, oh, I can really see myself working in this field and caring about this.
Thank you so much, Maggie. And so it's funny you say the EJ movement. I appreciate that because that's where we're at, right? When I say in the chat, we have the Harlem Renaissance social movement, we have civil rights, voter rights. Definitely. So we have health, equity, food justice movement. Uh, we have the EJ movement. It's hard to choose favorite, but right now I am focused on the social determinants of health in the current EJ movement. So it's my favorite and why I'm here. Thank you so much, Jessica. Hey, so Definitely. Let's keep that going, that interaction in the chat. And if you would like to speak, just go ahead and raise your hand. I think we know some of the folks here, so I think we'll be okay. In the next slide. So what is a coalition? Wow, 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 wow. Why we're here. So a coalition is a group of people unified by a shared vision, harnessing the power of coalition and diversity of thought, skill set, and expertise to achieve significant goals. And the sense of a coalition is broad of people and organizations from different sectors to generate a political will, technical expertise, and sustained funding necessary to connect in and between communities, and sometimes across county, state lines, and or international. And coalitions are groups of people or organizations working together to pursue a single goal. And coalitions often have a more formalized structure with the members making a long-term commitment to share responsibilities and resources. And this gives them clout and leverage, especially when they're trying to advance policy. And so whenever possible, organizations should seek to build or join a coalition to strengthen impact of their advocacy. So yes, that's another reason why the Midwest BDC was here, because no one was doing equitable building decarbonization in the region. We all know that we experience colder climates, and we have politics that may hinder us from advancing the work that we want to do. So that's why the Midwest BDC was formed. So think about the coalitions that you are part of and see if that's technically defined as a coalition. And so in the next slide, coalition building develops when two or more organizations come together, organizational relationships, to do something in common, a common concern, to make an impact of these concerns and to move it up to scale. And so coalition spaces are gathering of a diverse group of people to work together towards that common goal. Remember the word diverse. These spaces allow people with different experiences to build affinity work and to collaborate to more effectively and pursue equity. An example is the multi-racial justice organization Gender and Sexuality Alliance, Israeli-Palestinian peace camps. So that's an example of a coalition that is focused on equity, but then also having an affinity space, because Israeli-Palestinian can be associated with an ethnic group and or religion. But then also they have a common goal, right? To have peace between those two groups and conflicts that are happening there now. So in this next, oh, really? Okay. So right now we're going to take a couple of minutes. I want everybody to pull out a piece of paper. We're going to try to make this interactive, even though we are cutting down on security. So let's take a couple minutes and ask yourself, why am I here in this role at this organization, in this movement? And it does not have to be Midwest BDC, okay? Because I know we're all a part of different coalitions and stuff. So why am I here in that coalition? Why do I feel most certain about or motivated by right now? And then what are a few words or phrases that I want to practice embodying in a climate movement work over the next 2 weeks or longer? So we do know that this is Earth Month. So this is to give us a chance to recenter on our why of participating in building decarbonization, which is a part of the climate movement. Even though we're just focusing on indoor air quality in buildings and in homes and schools, what is your why and what do you want to practice embodying? So take about 5 minutes and we'll come back at 1:22, and I'm going to do this exercise too. And I would like to invite someone to come up and share these 3 questions if you don't mind. And you can, of course, also put it in the chat, but we'd love to hear from you. Why am I here? in this role, this organization, this movement? What is your why? I think sometimes we tend to lose our why of joining organizations, coalitions, networks, alliances, which can also become a breakdown in how we do the work and why we do the work. Why are you here? So I really wanted to be a teacher. So that's why I'm giving like these prompt questions. I hope you all are doing them. And if you are done, please raise your hand and we can call on you and invite you up to speak about these 3 questions. Or you can put it in the chat and I can read it out. Okay, so who would like to go or put it in the chat? Just raise your hand, and if you'd like to come off of mute, we will we allow you to do so. So Maggie, why are you here in this role at this organization, in this movement?
This is good. We got each other to go off of. This is the co-hosts. I like it. So I think I wrote down for mine is why am I here? I mean, first of all, for Marnese and I, it's our job, it's our day job. But beyond that, it's like, why are we in these jobs? We could be doing tons of other things too. So for me, it's like just having an impact. I mean, it's the people that we work with as well. Like, I love this community that we have in Midwest BDC. And then also for me, I think it's really using my kind of skills and time to contribute to something that I feel good about, not something that I feel like is having maybe a bad impact or even a neutral impact on the world around me. It's nice to like be doing something in my 9 to 5 that I feel good about. So I think that's definitely something for me. And then for what do I feel really certain or motivated by right now, I put creativity and engagement. I know some of the folks on the call might have seen or were also at the Midwest Climate Summit. It's like 2 weeks ago now. But ever since then, I've just been feeling kind of engaged creatively. I went to a session that was all about climate justice in art. And so that's something I've been thinking a lot about. Just in my work with communications too, I feel like I get to flex those creative muscles sometimes. So that's been something that's been motivating to me. And then what are a few words or phrases that I want to practice embodying? I also put that kind of like creative, thinking outside the box, new approaches in mind. I think sometimes in our work, it's easy to just kind of get in this cycle of doing what we've always done, just kind of like, okay, this has worked in the past, so I'm going to try it again. But I really want to bring in new approaches and just, yeah, get creative and continue to have fun with it and not get stuck in those cycles.
I totally agree. And I know my wife, of course, is like I work here, but then also, I do live in, I'm like technically the case study of the work that we do. I live in a home that I rent currently. And my 2 kids have asthma, and I do have a gas stove. So my house is so inefficient. And it's an older house because I live in the historic district. So I'm the test study and I understand, and I could be more empathetic to people who are experiencing the things that we are advocating for. And then I feel so right now and motivated right now because of, the transition and how we can help our positional power within this coalition space. And I'm motivated right now because we're definitely are really being seen around the work that we do. We might not think we're making an impact. How we are, right? And then a few words and phrases. I want to practice embodying. I would definitely want to continue to practice healing and the art of mindfulness of and empathy, because in this work it could be so much to unpack, and I plan to do that within especially out with my Earth Day activities. I'm going to continue to be mindful of the stories that I hear, so we can support them. And V raised her hand. Maggie, can you bring her up, and I'm going to read some of the responses. Thank you, V.
Okay.
Hi, V. Would you like to talk to us?
Yes. Okay, so why am I here? I want to become a better coalition builder and partner,
Mm-hmm.
and especially as it embodies equity, health, community learning, and preparing resources for future generations. I just want that to all go together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what do I feel most certain about or motivated about right now? Creativity and growth. I'm just like ready to step into the abyss, and I'm not really concerned if I fall because I know I
Mm-hmm.
can get back up, which is different for me because before was that certainty, and now I'm okay with the uncertainty. Um, for number three, what are a few words that I want to practice or embody? Mindfulness, like you has been mentioned already, being in the moment, and like I said, being comfortable with the uncomfortable, just knowing that it's going to be okay, that um the 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 climate, the concern about the climate, the concern about equity, the concern about um um leaving a better space for the next generation. I know that that's all going to happen, so all I have to do is do my work every day and it will be there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, V. And I'm just going to read Jessica's response. What I feel certain about people and communities are the experts of their own lived experience, and centering the lived experiences of our communities builds the connections needs to create sustainable responses to social determinants of health. Thank you, Jessica. And Aprilly, I'm here because it feels so natural and purposeful for me to be a land stewardess and environmentalist when I decided I wanted my life to be all about purpose. I transitioned into fully earth-based causes. I feel more certain about my health challenges and the fact that I want to share my story before I leave this world. And I'm most certain that we don't have as much time in this life as we sometimes think true. So I focus on gratitude and healing and the good aspects of people. And so in the next 2 weeks, I want to focus on natural it is for me and people to be one with nature, flow with nature, and consider how we can slow down and bid and streamline. Thank you. I love that. All right, so we're gonna keep moving, and I thank you all for participating in that. So organizing coalition. So okay, it should have all these types of people in the coalition, right? Even more so. This list does not stop there. So you should have economic development professionals, chambers of commerce, which is our business people, business improvement districts, public health agencies, community development corporations, land use planning, social equity community organizations, local and regional anchor institutions like hospitals, universities, major employers, real estate developers, environmental and advocacy organization, public entities like transportation, water, transit, housing, elected officials, local government, municipalities, national government. So I just take a step back and look at our coalition. And, when you have all these different entities, we got to figure out where do they all fit, right? What type of work do we want them to advance from where they sit? So when you're organizing a coalition, if you decide to do that on your own, make sure that you have some of these individuals there and identify what role that they will play. And so in the next slide, just talk a little bit about some advantages of having a coalition. It helps us shift the power dynamics that we could not do by ourselves, right? Increase the impact of individual organizational efforts. We all come to this work individually or with another organization. And so we want to help advance what they're trying to do locally or within their organization. Increase and share resources, broaden our scope of work, learn and acquire new skills, overcome barriers of history and forward new partnerships, build an ongoing power base and develop new leaders, right? And so some disadvantages, unfortunately, because there's disadvantages, distract from other work. Weak members, and I don't like the word weak members, but sometimes members may not add or participate or may feel like they can't add anything to a coalition. So sometimes the work starts to get stifled or there's too many things going on. So that could weaken a coalition. Too many compromises because you want everybody to get along, you want to please everybody, and sometimes it's just hard to make a decision. And then sometimes people will get their feelings hurt because their idea did not get advanced. Failed to give credit. I really try to pride myself on acknowledging, telling people like, well, no, that was her idea. That was that person's idea, because, you know, if you don't give credit, some people may feel like you're being insensitive to their idea or that was their idea. And that also can be a form of co-optation as well. Inequity of power, loss of control, guilt by association. And that's the one that really gets us into a pickle, especially when you're trying to do the work of equity. Some people don't want to be a part of a coalition if you have another individual and or member who they might not like for personal reasons, or they got into an argument, or they're doing the work differently. And that has been, I studied social movements in college, and that has been the downfall of a lot of movements, because they're guilty by who they associate with, even because they're doing the work in a different way, or their ideology is different, but they all believe in the same thing, right? And then all of a sudden you just lose control of what's going on, and then the coalition and or the movement starts to break down. So in the next slide though, so an effective approach for building coalitions: understand the value proposition of the coalition, agree on shared project vision, develop measurable projects, objectives, and goals, ensure the representation of diverse stakeholders are in the group, define clear roles and responsibilities. I promise that's the thing that we should do. And hold on, we're gonna definitely get back to managing the guilt by association. Yes. Define clear roles and responsibilities. Plan to leverage coalition relationships and anticipate and be transparent about leveraging coalition members' resources. So I love the fact that we do have a resource page. We develop these toolkits and these resources for our members to take it to other places. So that's what we're here for, right, as a coalition. And to your question, V, the way I manage guilt by association, another member organization didn't want to be a member of our organization, but they'll be a supporter, right? They didn't want to be a part of our coalition because another organization was doing something. And I said, okay, what is your why, right? If that person, I understand we're gonna get to this work, I'll get to the ultimate goal in a different manner. Okay, we have to understand that. However, if that person is not going against your values, or if that person or that organization, and this is a hard one because I was at another organization and they said, well, you work there. I said, but you need to build those relationships. And that's honestly the bottom line. You have to get to know people, their character. And we all have to understand we're all human. So people come to this movements for different reasons, for clout, for notoriety, maybe because they just really love the cause. Maybe they were bullied and they just want to advocate for something. People come to causes for a different reason. But the bottom line is, V, you have to build those relationships. And I tell people, you don't even know me to define me by the organization that I work at or that I'm a part of. And if you don't like something, and this was a very big national organization that I was a part of, if you don't like it, you need to get in there and change the game. Okay. And that's just any organization. If you don't like something, you have to get in there and make it aware. And once again, we have to understand everybody's not going to get to the ultimate goal the same way. That's definitely a good idea department on coalition building that we should revisit. That might be a check-in question at our next coalition meeting. Next slide. Actually, it will be. Thank you for that, because I don't have all the answers, but that's just the way I went about doing it. And once I continue to build those relationships, I showing up, people respected me and wanted to work with me, even though they saw this shift in how the work was getting done because they built relationships with me. So a thing question in the chat, what are some of the challenges have you experienced in coalition work? VSC, you acknowledge one. What systems and processes have worked well to overcome those challenges? What ones haven't worked for you? Okay. What skills and attributes do you see as necessary for climate leaders working to build multiracial cross-class coalitions? We're going to come back to this, okay? Because I think we're going to end with this question. So Maggie, we're going to keep going, but we're going to come back to this. Pin slide 17. So setting ground rules for starting a coalition, okay? Who makes the decisions regarding the campaign? How will decisions get made? By consensus, simply majority, 2/3 majority? Who can speak for the coalition? Okay, so here at the Midwest BDC, we ask leaders to go through the train-to-train model, which will be coming back up again. And you get certified and you become a speaker ambassador on behalf of the coalition. Who will control and spend funds, right? What is the process for changing the jointly developed campaign plan? How will disagreements be handled? How will the group ensure accountability? What are the ramifications if a participating group fails to complete a task? How will the coalition deal with the long-lived behavior by an individual or individual group? Ooh. So these are the questions our membership working group, aka our governance working group, had to grapple with when we're creating conflict of interest, our community norms, and then control and spend funds. Since we are 501c3 and we have staff functions, that is controlled by the staff. So, I think it's good to have a body like staff to help manage funds, since we are a 501c3, because you don't want to get in trouble with the IRS or anybody with misappropriating the funds and things of that nature. So you should definitely set up your infrastructure with these questions if you're going to start a coalition. So in the next slide, so effective coalitions is clearly articulated and understood goals, strong, flexible leadership, effective and disciplined strategies, swift decision-making mechanisms, coordinating among partners and parts, effective use of resources, resilience to external events, ability to identify and engage supporters. And so I like the fact that here in, with us becoming our own 501c3, we're at a good position where we can figure out a different way of how we do the work. What should we be doing? And that's called strategic planning, right? So all organizations have a cycle of when they have to transition what they're doing, how they're doing it, and what they're doing. So we're in that position right now at Midwest BDC. And so in the next slide, with coalitions and networks are interconnected individuals or groups associating around shared interests, but not necessarily collective actions. However, while coalitions and networks functions in different ways, they can be complementary. So there may be a way of how networks do the work versus coalitions doing the work. And in the next slide, networks consist of those individuals or organizations with those shared information and ideas to accomplish individual or group goals. And sometimes within networks and coalitions, they could be a paid membership. Networking is a process of acquiring resources and building power by using the linkage between two or more individuals, groups, or organizations. And sometimes networks tend to lose flexible associations of people and groups brought together by a common interest or concern to share information and ideas. So it's like networking, like with anything. I'm networking with you to get something done or something accomplished versus a coalition, which in my opinion, a network could come off transactional. With a coalition, you are developing and co-collaborating on a shared vision, right? So we want to make sure that we're working on transformational work versus transactional work. And sometimes networks can be seen as transactional, which is not really a bad thing, because we do have to network, we have to get to know people, we have to be in collaboration with other people who are different, right? So in the next slide, and don't worry, you will get access to these slides. Coalition sometimes can bring in different coalitions, can bring in affinity groups. And, within coalitions, it brings people together across different roles, identities, community affiliations, etc. We put up the slide of different groups, but sometimes affinity space can bring people together on the basis of shared identities or perspectives. For example, we can bring in a Black affinity group or people of color affinity group, and it's based on these different demographics, because this particular demographic may need assistance with advancing something that the whole coalition, it may not be focused on at that time, but need to focus on, because they may have different issues. For example, I'm a Black person, I'm a Black woman, and of course I'm going to look at this from an intersectional view, that we have to do things differently within the Black community, because we are the most marginalized community in the United States and internationally. So we have to do things differently. We have to focus and zero in on our issues versus in the broader sense. So in the next slide, and intersectionality, of course, is a concept used to articulate and analyze how overlapping identities are uniquely impacted by multiple systems of oppression. And so with intersectionality, this is important because in coalitions, if you're working in solidarity and mutuality, you're going to understand that most of us have intersecting identities, and we experience different oppressions that overlap with these identities. So it's important within your framework that you acknowledge that. And so with the principles of inclusion, including people, take a step back so all voices can be heard, and understand there's a power and privilege, and understanding that intersectionality framework have to be considered when you're building a coalition, because we may miss something that we're not acknowledging. We don't want vulnerable communities to feel like they're being overlooked. Okay. So this is definitely hard work to do, but it's definitely necessary. And so in the next slide, we do have an anti-oppression rule. We have to acknowledge our position of power and privilege within coalition spaces. We know that white males dominate building decarbonization, so they have a position of power where they can use their position of power to advocate for communities that have been impacted by indoor air quality, the health issues, the economic issues the most. So if you're on this position of power scale, you can identify your position of power and speak out and for other groups that may be marginalized. So in the next slide, so addressing conflicts, and Maggie, and I'm gonna pivot to Maggie shortly. There's gonna always be conflicts everywhere because we're humans. We we unfortunately have to manage our assumption and perceptions, and that could be different people view the same situation and see it differently because their past experience and personal beliefs and values differ. Individual values, needs, and goals. People have individual values, needs, and goals of individual may conflict with another's values, needs, and goals. And so sometimes that conflict may happen and may spun out into the coalitional space. Organizational values, needs, and goals. The values, needs, and goals of an organization may be in conflict with values, needs, and goals of the other coalition and networks of mission members, and that can stifle the growth of getting things done. And then, quite simple, emotions. People are powered by emotions, fear, anger, anxiety, frustration of getting the work done, how you get the work done. And so that can be translated out into coalitional spaces. And then lack of information or clarity, right? And there may be some competition, struggles for time, money, attention, performance, personal issues, group success, group dynamics. And so these conflicts happen within a coalition space. And so to manage those, in the next slide, you have to make sure that you not avoid the situation, handle the situation head on. That's why we have a conflict of interest within our membership working group. Diffuse the situation. It's kind of like avoidance, but it will work to delay the situation as possible. But the best way to do it is to confront the issue between the different peoples. We want to create a win-win situation for people, and that's why you negotiate with the individuals who have the conflict so we can create a win-win situation. So in the next slide, to have a successful coalition, we should operate by rainbow, build relationships with community members and organizations outside of the crisis, ask a community organization what their issue is, interest, and value. So we're not going to go be climate missionaries or missionaries in general, and don't assume that their issues are the same. Involve, build transparent and democratic structures or decision making, and build new leadership. Nurture the coalition partners, and coalition itself must be nurtured and sustained. So we have to educate, consult, mobilize, and continue to activate the members and to build capacity among the members, build the alliances, and expand outside of your own network, invite people along. Organize, know the difference between mobilizing and organizing, right? And then win. The only way to win is that we continue to organize and build power and capacity at the grassroots level. So we have to definitely practice democracy. And so in the next slide, we're going to talk more about communicating within the coalitional space.
All right, unmuted. I defined my button. Awesome. Okay, thanks for that overview on coalition building from Marnese. I'm going to take us on a little bit more of a deep dive into communicating inside coalitions and then communicating out, like essentially the work that the coalition is doing and how we can leverage that power. I'm going to try to go through pretty quickly so we still have some time at the end for questions. So if there's anything you want more details on, just drop it in the chat and I can make sure to follow up with you afterwards or when we have that question and answer time. So first off, within the coalition, kind of like Marnese mentioned, we can come to these groups ideally with a lot of diversity in backgrounds, in experience, in age, in all of these different things. So we need to get on the same page to do the work effectively. So some of the ways that Midwest BDC does this is we have our community norms. We like to lift those up at the top of our working group meetings so that we can all kind of be centered and just like reminded essentially of the norms that we operate under. And then we also operate under shared definitions. So on the screen, you can see two of our shared definitions for equity. And then we have an equitable building decarbonization definition as well. And then we also have our values. So these definitions were created by coalition members in collaboration with staff, with board members, with working group leads. And so I think another thing that's important to highlight is that this was a collaborative process. It's not that top down, like, okay, here's Midwest BDC's definitions, either, you know, operate under these or not. This is something that we came up together with our coalition members. So we could just identify what was important to each of them, essentially. And so I also like to highlight the mission, vision, and values. So we have our values on the screen, but Midwest BDC's mission, like Marnese said at the beginning of the call, is to equitably decarbonize the Midwestern building sector by 2050. And I think really rooting in our mission, vision, and values is a way to kind of reel ourselves back in when we get into those moments of conflict. Like Marnese said, in coalitions, sometimes the conflict can just be that, you know, two different groups want the same goal, but they're going about getting there differently. And so when we have a moment like that, I think it's good to take a step back and think about, okay, what is our mission? What's our vision? What are our values? And kind of recenter in that before, you know, we go on a whole tangent about how we want to get the work done differently. Sometimes just recentering for a moment can bring us back together. All right, and so another little communications piece, just briefly, I'm going to explain what branding is and then how having consistent branding can help us leverage power within a coalition. So branding is essentially just made up of the fonts, the logos, the colors, the graphics that an organization uses over and over again consistently so that people begin to associate these things with the organization. So ideally, if you have a really strong brand, and you can see some examples here of different events we've had, our member logo, some toolkits, we would love to get to the point where it's like you could take Midwest BDC off of any of these individual graphics and someone would still know, oh, that's a Midwest BDC event because they have that familiarity with our colors and logos and all of those things. So on the next slide, one reason why it's important to have that consistency is because we want to know who our audience is and then also who we want to bring in. So through intentional outreach, Marnese mentioned those different groups that engage with coalitions earlier. Here are just some, you know, they're listed out, some of the groups that we work with a lot. And it's important to have in a coalition that's so diverse and broad as ours is, to have individual events that kind of cater to these different groups and different interests, and then can pull them into the larger coalition. So on the last slide, for example, we had a health themed training last month. You know, that might bring in those people who are interested in health and wellness or who are interested in public health and who might not have really heard of building decarbonization before. But we do that outreach to the health focused groups to then bring them in and say, look, there's a space for you in this coalition with all these other interests and, you know, this topic, decarbonization, that you might not have heard of before. So benefits of a coalition that Marnese mentioned, you're part of a whole. We have power and strength in numbers. There's a network of support within a coalition. And then also we have a larger geographic reach than we would individually. So pointing back to the coalition can kind of just like increase your clout essentially. So our coalition offers a larger geographic reach and connection. When there's an advocacy issue that's happening in one state, we can share resources and learn from states who have already been through that process. So that's happening right now in our federal policy working group and the home energy rebates. States are engaging in public input sessions in different times. So our coalition is able to, you know, learn what Wisconsin's process looked like, and then take what worked, what didn't work, what we learned from that, and then apply it to the other states who are going through that process at a different time. And this kind of clout and power and strength in numbers is also why we always encourage our members to use that proud member of the Midwest BDC logo on their events, on flyers, on toolkits they're putting out, essentially just anything where they want to say like, hey, I have a larger group backing me up. This information has kind of been supported by this larger group. So it's a good way to just have that extra little bit of support behind the work that you're individually doing. All right, and then we also want to make sure we're leveraging power through coalition member resources. So these are just a couple of examples of Midwest BDC's coalition resources. So on the left here, this is essentially it's a group on Twitter that we have for Midwest BDC members. So when you apply for membership, there's an option for you to list out you or your organization's social media handles. That way, myself as the communications manager can make sure that we're following you, that we're retweeting or reposting what you're doing, and essentially just supporting you and getting your work out in front of more eyes. And so that's also really the function of our Midwest BDC member events form. All of these can be found on the website, by the way. But that event form is really similar. It's just a place for members to drop in events that they're working on in their home communities or home states that we might not know of otherwise. So since I'm based in Ohio, I might not know what events are going on in Iowa, but if a member fills out this form, then I'm able to support those and share them with our network and really just, get more eyes on the work that everybody's doing. Then we also have our grant recipients in the news page on the website. And so again, this is just another way to highlight the work that coalition members, and in this case specifically, our empowerment grant recipients are doing in one hub. So we really want the Midwest BDC website and social media to serve as a place that anyone can go to get a quick glance on what's happening all across our region, knowing that, we're all only in one place, but we have this regional coalition, so we can support each other that way. All right, and then representing a coalition, this is kind of on the external communication side. So we all play different roles, but we also all intersect. So some of the roles that staff members play in a coalition are providing the infrastructure for the coalition, guiding the direction of the coalition's work, assisting with setting the actions of working groups, and creating official coalition events, and serving as ambassadors for the coalition. Now, there's some overlap there with board members and coalition members too. So for example, board members also serve as ambassadors for the coalition. They help to bring in funders and funding opportunities and new members. They support the executive director. And then board members also guide the direction of the coalition's work, their organizational culture, their strategic focus, and their financial sustainability. And then members, again, also act as ambassadors of the coalition. They bring in new members. They serve in leadership positions within the coalition. So for us, that's our working group leaders. And then they set the actions of those working groups. And then they share resources and support members as well. So we all are kind of working together in this space. Some roles are different. A lot of them overlap. And that's kind of also the shared leadership model that we like to lift up here at Midwest BDC. All right, and then I'm going to go through this really quickly because we only have 5 minutes left, but these are some of the communications resources that we have here, and I'll make sure to follow up with all of these in the email that goes out after this, and they can all be found on our website. So we put out toolkits and talking points. These can be used for folks wanting to engage in different technical aspects. So we have our QAP commenting toolkit. Then we have a lot going on right now with the home energy rebate public input sessions, and then also a federal grant application toolkit that kind of walks people through applying for federal grants, which can be an extremely confusing and taxing process. Then we also have one-pagers. These can be shared out with folks who maybe want to learn a little bit more about Midwest BDC. They can be printed out at tabling events, anything like that, where you just want to get the idea out there to someone at a glance. We also have our training archive. So this is also a great way, I used the health training earlier as an example, but if you have a friend who is really interested in public health or environmental health or indoor air quality, you can say, hey, I'm part of Midwest BDC. Check out this training we did on the health aspects of decarbonization, join our health working group. There's all these ways you can kind of get in and meet folks where they're at and where their interests are, and then bring them into a larger movement. Then again, we also have our website, and that's like really where the hub of our resources live. So we have all about our working groups there. And then on the bottom of the screen, you can see on our member resources page, we also have staff office hours. So this is kind of the easiest way to direct someone to Midwest BDC who might be wanting to learn more. You could always just send them this page and say like, hey, I think you should have a meeting with Marnese and learn about what Midwest BDC is all about. Or if they're interested in grants, you can say, hey, we have a grants director, Eddie Davis. Learn about what he does and meet with him here. So we really try to make ourselves accessible to people, and really just try to build that relationship of, people are giving their time to our mission, and so we want to be giving them resources back as much as we can. All right, and then just some key takeaways. So communicating within our coalitions, really finding those common definitions and community norms are important, and then centering back on our mission and values. And then when you're communicating outside of the coalition, really pointing back to the coalition, leveraging that power in numbers, leveraging that regional clout, then also utilizing our resources that uplift your individual work to a larger audience. All right, and I know I went quickly, so if there's any questions, please feel free to raise your hand now, or you can drop them in the chat there.
Okay, so yes. Can you go back to slide 17? As we said before, we will share the slides out. This training will be on our YouTube. So questions, what are some of the challenges have experienced working in coalition? And if you want to put that in the chat, that's great. And we're definitely gonna workshop this at a monthly meeting, but we just want to make sure that we have time together. We got about 2 more minutes, but anybody want to express any challenges doing coalition work? And of course, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat. And if not, the slide deck will be made available to you. And of course, all the resources. Okay. Well, thank you both. Thank you all for participating in this training, this brief training. But guess what? We have some coming events. Today we will resume our next podcast with Matre Moore, with the public involvement and outreach specialists, and also the Wisconsin NAACP. Earth Day is every day. And then next week we will have some more podcasts coming up with Aprilli Amani, Jackie Patterson, and then Jacob will continue his training on affordable housing tax credits and building decarbonization. So we thank you all for attending. This information will be posted on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, and we'll see you all next time.
Okay. All right. Bye, everyone.